In this video, I systemized what I wish to know when I first started managing a multicultural team. Where's my team? Now I'm good. It is getting more common. People used to move countries for work all the time, but now we have people living in different countries and working together as a team, fully remotely. For a manager, helping such a diverse team to succeed is a completely different ballgame. I've prepared a structured guide for you with 5 crucial parts: cultural differences, communication, relationship, conflicts, and leadership. Trust me, this will equip you well. Managing a multinational team takes a lot of effort and self-awareness, but it is a fantastic experience that is 100% worth it. Let's go. And the first part is understand cultural differences. For the context, today we're talking about the cases where you manage a team where you have one or more cultures present, which can include your culture as a manager as well. Also, you can be directly managing these teams or indirectly. As a project manager, for example, everything that I will say will still be valid. And the first step is, and it can feel obvious or simple, but it is incredibly important, is to accept that people are different. There is a thing that is called unconscious incompetence. It means we don't know that we're incompetent in things that we don't know about. For example, if you've never seen a bike in your life, you would never even know that you don't have a skill of riding a bike. So to eventually learn how to ride a bike, you first need to find out that bikes exist and you need a certain skill to be able to ride it. The same here. All of us in the past used to work with people from the same culture, like-minded people, or people who share the same cultural code. And sometimes we don't even think that managing people from different cultures may require from us different skills. So first and foremost, let's accept that people are different. People from different cultures may be different in unusual ways for us. And to put it simply and be practical, it will help us not to get irritated when things are not happening in the way that we expected, because we accept it as something normal. Next, to understand the cultural differences, we need to research different cultures. And here I want to make a disclaimer, like disclaimer, capital D. We're doing that not to make assumptions about people, but to understand people better. I really want this thought to stick. If you will take only one thought from this video, please take this. There are so many culture-specific traits, but all of them are less important than the individual that is in front of you. While we research the cultures, it is also important to learn about cultural stereotypes in order not to fall for that. We do not make assumptions about people, and between cultural background and personality should always prevail. And what actually helps with understanding cultural differences is to keep an open mindset. It is very natural for us to favor people who are more like us in the way we look, in the way we speak, in the way we think. So we need to be critical towards our thinking process and keep it open-minded. To dive deeper into specifics of these differences between different cultures, of course, we have one and only book, Culture Map. I will not be covering in this video like all of the difference between all of the cultures because it would be semi-impossible. But if you read this book, it will close 70-80% of specific questions that you are having regarding specific cultures that you have present in your team. Now let's talk about communication. And to be honest, some parts of it feels a little bit sensitive. At least I saw a lot of people in corporates avoiding transparently talking about it, but I will try my best. And the first part here is language barriers. I mean, a lot of us in corporate setting speak English, and for many of us, it's not the first language. So it comes with potential challenges, especially if some people in the team have English as their native language. First, we sometimes use slang or idioms without even noticing it, and it can make a life of a listener so much harder, especially if you don't feel confident enough to actually ask, wait, what did that actually mean? So as a manager, you should be aware about the cases when you do that, when you use the slang, and in the discussions where you're present, kind of keep an eye on that. Because again, not everyone is comfortable saying, oh, this thing I don't get, because English is not their first language. Also, we do struggle with accents sometimes. And if you ask me, my opinion, I don't think that having an accent is a bad thing. I don't believe in totally eliminating anything that reminds in your speech about your native language. But sometimes it can be so prominent that people are kind of struggling with understanding us and the other way around as well. And if that happens in your team, of course, it requires very gentle one-to-one feedback. But in general, when we speak about language barriers in a wider sense, the goal is for us to be as clear as possible with our team. And I'm not talking about simplifying things to, dumb things down for someone, but you need to articulate clearly just to make sure that you actually reached a level of understanding with people you work with. And remember, the fact that some people are less fluent in English than you are does not make them less intelligent. A big part of communication in multicultural team is active listening. You can say, wait a minute, isn't active listening important for any team? But if you're having a culturally homogeneous team, it is much easier for you to understand each other. And sometimes you can get away, reach a certain level of understanding without putting as much effort. But with a multicultural team, it requires more emphasis on active listening from your side as a manager. Finally, you have to be aware that different cultures have communicational differences. What may be considered as a sign of agreement in one culture can be a sign of confusion or even disagreement in another. Part 3 is about building trust and relationship. If we as managers are lucky enough to work with different cultures, we need to be curious about it and not judgmental. This is what it means to celebrate diversity. For example, we shouldn't assume a universal team building activities, some of the things that are considered fun for a team, like a group of coworkers, may not be like that for others. By the way, that's not only a cultural thing, that's a general thing. It is very good when we know and respect other cultural holidays. And when we work, we need to respect different time zones from where people are working. And of course, work happens and working hours can be shifted, but you need to agree on that, establish the rules of the game, let's say, and stick to it. And from my experience, what very much helps with building trust and relationship is to be aware how we work with directness and indirectness. Sometimes we are kind of quick to misinterpret directness and indirectness based on our own personal cultural background. Sometimes we think that directness is rudeness and indirectness is lack of assertiveness, which sometimes has nothing to do with the intention of the person. And it can prevent you from building a good relationship with people. The next part is conflict resolution. Conflicts are normal. They happen. It is suspicious when they don't. But as managers, sometimes we need to mediate this conflict, and in a multicultural team, it requires a cultural context. Let me explain what I mean in a few examples. Sometimes conflict can be less noticeable because in some cultures, people are kind of more inclined to indirect confrontation because they want to preserve the harmony in the team or save face. There is a concept of saving face that also kind of pushes people to not being openly confrontational. And if you're not aware of that, some of the frictions between team members can go unnoticeable and it won't get resolved in the end. And unresolved conflicts, they have an accumulative effect and it leads to a not a very good team dynamic. Or another example is sometimes there are simple things. In some cultures, people can kind of avoid the eye contact and it is a sign of attentiveness and it can be misinterpreted by others as dishonesty, and you can in the end have a conflict between two people without any objective reason. So when you're in the conflict or when you as a manager mediate the conflict, challenge yourself in how you are interpreting behaviors of others. Finally, let's talk about leadership itself and decision making. Leadership is nuanced. There are multiple styles that work better or worse with different people. And with a multicultural team, there is a chance that you may need to adapt some nuance. Keep in mind that people from different cultures can have different expectations from you as a leader. I'll give you an example. There are cultures that value a consensus building a lot, so it is expected for a decision-making process to involve everyone and first reach a total consensus before moving on. And some cultures are more focused on decision-making of the individual and more on the autonomy. It does not mean that you as a manager need to assume one over another with a person from a particular culture, but it requires you to be aware about these differences and pick leadership styles that works for your team, that makes you and them feel comfortable and helps them show their best work. Also, when managing teams like that, we should not assume that everyone shares the same values or priorities. There are cultures where work-life balance is very much valued. Everyone prioritizes their personal time, and there are some where people actively prioritize longer working hours. This is how they show that they value their work, they are dedicated to their work. And it doesn't mean that each one of those is bad, but it is expected from you as the manager of this team to be aware of that and make managerial choices daily considering that. For example, you as a manager may be used to acknowledging and rewarding your team in a very public manner, and in some culture it is kind of less popular. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't publicly acknowledge them, but it means you need to be aware of that, and considering that you can, tone it up or down a little bit when you think it is appropriate. In the end, I kind of have a faith that you will be able to make a good quality decision when it comes to your team dynamics if you will be aware about these things. By the way, if you're managing the team that is relatively small, it's great. I made a video on how to wisely use the time when your team is still small. So check it out if you like. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you there.